Hey, folks, this is V coming to you live, and we have with us some two very special guests. Number one is Harley Schlanger, who needs no introduction. He's all familiar to you. And Harley, will you introduce our special guest, Bill Binney? Go for it, Harley.
Yes, we're really privileged to have Bill Binney, William Binney, who spent a number of years developing the capability to use cyber technologies, cyber warfare, cyber espionage. One of the most profound, I guess you could say, thinkers or doers, who has a career many long years at the NSA, and then was when he was trying to straighten out the problems at the NSA with a special program called Thin Thread, which would have saved money and would have been more effective and would have not been spying on everyone. They got rid of him and turned him into persona non grata. But fortunately, Bill's a tough cookie. He's stayed in the fight, and he has the story to tell about the real so-called Russian hacking. So with that, I'll just add one other thing. Bill was with the technical team for a time as a technical director at the National Security Agency. Bill, why don't we start with this whole question that's still part of the official fiction of the Russian hacking?
Yeah.
You're the expert on this. What actually happened?
Well, I mean, from the evidence we can look at, that's the posted WikiLeaks data for the DNC posted data by WikiLeaks. That's clearly showed that the data itself was read to a storage device, and because it showed the property of a fat file transfer, which means a fat file allocation table. It's a process that reads data to a storage device like a thumb drive or a CD-ROM. And when it does that, it modifies the last modified time of each file to the nearest even second. Well, I think slightly over 500 files that were there and timestamped with the last modified timestamp, all of them show that last even number. So last modified time is an even numbered second, which means that the likelihood of it not being read down to a storage device is like 1 chance in 2 to the 500 power, which is pretty small. So it basically means somebody read the data to a file, to a thumb drive or a CD-ROM, and physically transported it before WikiLeaks got it to post. So that kind of negates the Russian hack from Russia or anywhere in Europe.
And you did a test to see if you actually could match the times that it would take to do it.
Okay, that's the second issue, Harley. That's the Goose for Two data. Here, this is a little different now. Goose for Two showed up shortly after the WikiLeaks started to post the data, and he came out and claimed he was a Russian, or he claimed he hacked it for the Russians. And Brennan and Rosenstein used that as calling Goose for Two an agent of the Russians, and without no proof whatsoever. Of course, I mean, everything they've been saying has no proof at all and backing up. There's no proof at all. The ICA, for example, said, we say this with high confidence, but we don't really have, we don't mean that anything we're saying here is absolutely true. So it's just like that. Mueller and his whole report, it's all basically, weasel-worded speculation that's trying to allow them an out any way they go. For example, I think it's on page 50, the Mueller report simply says we didn't really look at any evidence, any hard evidence or anything. We depended on FBI, and the states and the police to do it. Well, the police didn't do it either. I mean, the FBI didn't have the data, so they made this charge, of course, against Roger Stone that he was involved with this process. And again, they did it with an allegation starting out that the Russians, it's a basic assumption they have. There's no proof whatsoever of any of it, that the Russians hacked anything. In fact, the proof is totally the opposite. Somebody downloaded it to a storage device.
So you're talking about an inside job then?
Yes, and the same is true with the Goose for Two data. With the Goose for Two data, he put out 2 batches of data, one the date of the 5th of July and one the 1st of September. And we went through and calculated the transfer speeds, because every file at the end of the file had a timestamp on it, so that all you do is difference of time between the files and see the numbers of characters of the file between those times, and you could calculate the speed. which is what we did. And we found that the ranges of speeds ranged from 19 megabytes per second to about 49.1 megabytes per second. And we said that obviously that speed wouldn't go across the network to Europe. So some of our VIPS people said they thought it could, and we said, well, okay, we'll try it just to demonstrate it. So we did it with a 100 megabit line, a 200 megabit line, and a data center line, basically looking at from Serbia, Albania, Netherlands, a couple places, and in the UK and London. And the fastest we got was the data centers between New Jersey and the UK and London. That was 12 megabytes per second, which simply is like less than 1/4 the capacity that would be necessary to transfer that 49.1 megabytes per second. So obviously that could not be a transfer across the web from all our testing. In fact, we said, okay, if somebody thinks they have a line or a connection that will allow that to happen, and that is to get it to Russia, then you tell us where it is. We'll help you test it and prove the point. And we haven't had anybody come forward and give us any indication of where the line is that would accomplish that speed. So
was there
we're just saying everybody's just blowing hot air here. It's all empty thoughts and it's wishful allegations, I guess is what you call it.
Was there any forensic evidence in the Mueller report?
No. I mean, that's one of the things I look for, some kind of hard evidence. There was nothing. I mean, there was nothing but this guy speculating. That's all.
And the CrowdStrike never did anything that they made public?
No, in fact, at one point, somebody was saying that CrowdStrike would like to brief me publicly, and I said, great, I'll do that. I said, but I have one condition. Everything I'm looking at is in public view. Anybody can go look at this data, analyze it any way they want to, and say, here's some other evidence or something that would prove some point, and nobody has, okay? Nobody's added or detracted from anything that we in the VIPS and associated researchers on this problem have come up with. So my requirement before we have an open public debate is that I get to see all the forensics evidence that you looked at to make your decision. So I need to see the entire network log of the servers that you're looking at to show this Russian hacking. And I haven't heard from them since.
You were never contacted by the special counsel's office?
No. The only one who contacted me was Director Pompeo of CIA, and he said he did that because the president said if he wanted to know facts about Russiagate, then he needed to talk to me. Well, that tells you those folks don't have any evidence about Russiagate. So if they did, they would clearly state them. That's the point. That's the whole. I mean, they're calling this, some of the people in Congress call this an act of war. Well, you don't do that kind of thing without producing evidence to make people sure that, I mean, look what we did in Iraq with slam dunks, and what we did in Vietnam with, or what we're doing around the world today. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we're moving around using our power everywhere without actually having a basis for a factual basis to do any of it. It's all based on speculation or wishful thinking, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it.
You actually had a meeting with Pompeo after he was director of the CIA. What happened there?
Well, I mean, he started out by saying the president said I should talk to you if I wanted to know facts about Russiagate. Well, that tells you what the intelligence community is doing. Absolutely nothing. They're not telling him this is what I told him. The intelligence community is your own, even the CIA as well as NSA and FBI, all of them. They're not telling you the truth, or the president. So, there's evidence there. They have it. They know it, and they're not telling you about it. So that was basically what I told him. Also, I gave him the evidence that I had on the download speeds and all that. And later on, we developed the last modified times with the DNC data. So it's clearly not a hack from Russia on any of it. And so basically that's what I told him. They asked, he had a couple of technical people there with me, and they asked me what was the basis for our calculations. And I told them that and it's all out there on the web. They can go look at it too if they want to. So, that was my point, was everything is there for everyone to see, for peer review. And so far, nobody's come up and said any different conclusions than what we've asserted from the VIPS.
Now, for those who don't know, VIPS is the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, which is an organization that Bill and
Ray McGovern
were instrumental in setting up, which includes whistleblowers and top people who stay on top of these kinds of things. Now, I find it astounding that someone told the president that you had done something so that he would tell Pompeo to find out about it. So on some level, it must be that Trump is aware that there's a dispute on this. He knows it's not Russia.
Yep.
And yet we've had 2.5 years now in which he's been unable to pursue the peaceful negotiations, the cooperation with Putin that he wanted to because of
this is the basic fallout of all this false allegations. You know, it's putting the president in a position, and also he's got people around him advising him, not to trust him and all that. Well, if you reverse the position, say, let us take the position of Russia. After the Soviet Union broke up, there was a verbal agreement between the U.S. and the Russians and the Ukrainians that the Ukrainians would turn over all the nuclear weapons they had for Russia to manage. And in return, the U.S. would not move NATO further east. And what have we done? Well, we moved it right up to the Russian border, basically. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, and also try to get Ukraine to join. Now, the big mistake we made was that when we were asking Ukraine to join, why didn't we also ask Russia at the same time? After all, there's very little difference between them. I mean, it's a matter of just saying, okay, let's be inclusive about it instead of exclusive. Well, you see, the point was what all these people wanted to do was they needed an external enemy that they could point to and say, we are threatened here. We can fearmonger the U.S. public to give us more and more money for a new Cold War. Now, in order to do that, you're going to have somebody like Russia with a lot of nuclear weapons, right? So now and we have to continue having them be that enemy, a perceived enemy. So so they couldn't tolerate President Trump going over there and having any kind of discussion with Putin to try to normalize relationships. That just wouldn't follow into their long-range plan of getting and swindling the U.S. public for more and more money, and basically extending their power over more countries in the world.
Bill, I think the listeners would be very interested in hearing, speaking of this question of the money, what you were working on with the Thin Thread project, which would have saved a lot of money and it would have protected a lot of people from having their data collected. Why don't you say something about that?
Sure. I mean, the cost for us to develop Thin Thread from the very beginning, from scratch to actually having it operating in 24 hours a day at 3 separate sites for a little over a year, it had been running like that. The whole total cost was approximately $3.2 million. Now, General Hayden came in and wanted to create a program called Trailblazer, and he wanted the contractors to do it, so he outsourced that. And their first request for money for the first 5 years of that program was $3.8 billion. That's more than 1,000 times the cost of the total development of Thin Thread. And that didn't get it deployed or implemented or anything. That was just to develop it. And it went, according to Tom Drake, it went several multiples of that before it totally went away. But it basically failed in 2006, I think it was the final verdict of dead. So all that money was wasted. And in the meantime,
were we any more safe because of the massive data collection?
No, in fact, they got rid of all the targeted approach that we had. We basically developed a program, the Thin Thread program, to pull the needles out of the haystack and let the haystack go right by. So you wouldn't have to build things like a multi-billion-dollar facility out there in Utah, or now they're building a 2.8 million square foot facility over in Fort Meade. They took out a 36-hole golf course to do it, and so I don't know, that was going to be 5-6 billion, and that's just to store this extraneous, irrelevant data on everybody on the planet. So that's just the storage capacity, not counting the cost to transport, and maintain and interrogate and all the programs and software and contractors they have to maintain and keep that process going. And it didn't count all of the original further developments to make sure you could do extended to your partners, like the Five Eyes and about 8 or 9 other countries in the world, plus all the departments of the U.S. government. So there was a lot more expense than just the 1,000 times they paid for the first 5 years of it. Now this has been going on, almost getting close to 20 years now. So
Yeah.
So it's been a lot more expensive than that, and a lot of millionaires were made out of that, But in the process, they failed to protect anybody in this country with that program, simply because they dumped too much data on everybody. When you do bulk collection on everybody in the planet, including all us in the U.S., you just basically make people dysfunctional, and that's fundamentally what internally in NSA from the Snowden materials here. They were writing articles, in the NSA and in MI5 and at GCHQ saying we can't see the threats coming. We're overloaded and overburdened, So, it's even their analysts are saying that, but the people in charge are not listening. Why? Because there's so much money involved here. This is tens of billions every year.
Well, Bill, I have 2 more questions for you, and then I'm sure V is chomping at the bit to get at you, but you're going to be participating in the defense on behalf of the defense of Roger Stone.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I put in a sworn affidavit, and I'm prepared to produce the evidence in court of law, right? So these are the last modified file times of the DNC data posted by WikiLeaks, and also the Guccifer 2 data with the speed calculations and the timing and merging. The one thing I forgot to add was the 2 files he put out, the 5 July and 1 September. When you look down at the files all the way to the millisecond, the thousandths of a second, those 2 files just merged together without conflict. So the holes in the one file in 5 July are filled by the data from the 1st of September. So it means, this guy Guccifer 2, he's really playing game with the data, and he's playing a game with us. This is a total fabrication.
What the guy's done. The fabrication possibly of Brennan or someone on that level?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Those are certainly capable by those people, yeah.
Yeah. Now, my second question is that that we at LaRouche PAC have been focused on the British role in this, starting with GCHQ, Hannigan's visit over to Brennan, which in itself was somewhat strange that he would talk to Brennan rather than the NSA. Role of Christopher Steele. This is increasingly out in the open now.
Yep.
And one of the most recent developments, which shows the fraud of the Mueller report, is that there were files released through FOIA on Konstantin Klimenik, who Mueller reported he was a partner of Manafort,
Yeah.
and Mueller said he was a Russian agent. Turns out he was working for the State Department.
Yep.
So
and
what are your thoughts on
also
this?
the Steele dossier still came from MI6, the equivalent of CIA in UK. So
Well, why do you think there's such an effort to cover up this British role when it's clear that the Obama team, with Brennan, Clapper, and others, were coordinating everything through MI6 and the same people who created the Iraq weapons of mass destruction fraudulent dossier?
Well, I just think that was the whole thing that was originally orchestrated inside, and I think my sense is it came from CIA internally, and CIA, and Brennan seemed to me to be the orchestrator of this, or the conductor, and the approver was the president, Obama, because he had to get all the other organizations to line up and support that effort. CIA, FBI, and State Department, and DOJ. The only place those organizations come together at one point is the presidency.
And the people that you work with in the VIPs and the people you're in touch with in the broader whistleblower community are pretty clear on that. So How do we get this into the media? I mean, you're doing yeoman's work whenever you're asked, you're out there telling the story, but how do we break this stranglehold from the media?
And see, that's going to be tough because if you recall, in the early 1980s, at the time, I think Casey was the director of CIA, and he was quoted as saying at one point that we've been infiltrating the media for decades, and you'll know that we've succeeded when about 70% of what is known is false.
I think we may be at about 90% now.
Yeah, I think he's really succeeded well. He planted the seed, and it certainly was fertilized all along by a number of presidents and what have you, and Congresses. So yeah.
V, what would you like to hear from Bill?
I think the thing is this. I think a lot of us that are awake, that a lot of us that are privy to what's going on and that are not dissuaded by what's happening with the with the mainstream media and then simple political rhetoric going back and forth. What we would like to know is this: what do you recommend, Bill, that we do as a citizenry to be more engaged and to really help push this truth, this not just a narrative, but this absolute truth to the front line? Because I truly believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that we are witnessing a soft coup, that we are witnessing a color revolution right here in the United States.
There's no question of that. No, yeah. That's absolutely right.
And that would be the question: is how do we stop this machine?
Yeah. Well, see, my point is that the Attorney General Barr has got the realms. He's got the reins here to conduct and direct this whole action. He's got to. If you start seeing him issuing referrals to grand juries for indictments of people about this, and you get maybe 15, 20 indictments at least, then you'll know he's going to he's going to change the Department of Just Us. Which is
I'm
what
glad you said that. I would joke with them and say that as well. The Just Us department.
Yeah, exactly. We're not included. But if he starts moving the right direction and doing the right things, then you'll understand that and have some confidence in that he is actually going to change it back to the Department of Justice. And until then, if you don't put these people in jail, you'll never stop it. I mean, because it will only get worse. I mean, look, everybody in the government then would look back and say, well, hey, these guys did it and nobody cared. Nobody held them accountable. So I can do anything I want to, too. That's why I blame this whole process on Jerry Ford. When he pardoned Nixon, that basically told every president that he can do anything he wants because the next president will want to do anything he wants. And in order for him to be able to do that, he's got to make sure you don't get held accountable. So it's a get out of jail free card for anything you do.
I think that's where Trump deserves some credit.
Yeah.
Because after what we saw with Obama letting Bush off the hook, because he wanted to do the same thing. And
that's right. That's exactly
right. Yep. And so Trump said exactly what you just said, that the reason he's pursuing this is so that no other president will have to go through this. Do you think there's an appreciation of intelligence professionals that for the courage of Trump in standing up against these guys?
No. Because most of them are a part of it, and they want to be covered. They want cover, and they need to have if one of these dominoes fall, they all start to fall. That's what they're afraid of. Okay, so and that's sunlight is the kicker here. That's why they're so hard on Julian Assange and Manning and so on. They put sunlight on some very bad things, and it was done by our government, and they didn't like that very much. And that's the sunlight that they need to make sure that anybody that does that really gets the screws. So in other words, they have to step on them as hard as much as they possibly can. So and they're also going now, I guess, after Kim.com because he said on television that I saw in one of the channels here that he assisted Seth Rich in the transfer of data to WikiLeaks, and if that's true, then that's the proof of the inside job, who did it inside. That's all.
Yeah.
So
and that also brings to light exactly what exactly happened to Seth Rich, how he just conveniently dropped dead. No problem.
Let me just shut this off here. Go ahead.
Yeah, and also kind of brings to light how Seth Rich just mysteriously just drops dead out of nowhere.
Yeah.
On a so-called robbery where nothing was taken from him. His wallet is intact, his credit cards, his money.
Yeah. Looks more like an assassination. Yeah.
Exactly. It's very, very suspect.
Yep.
Bill, a lot of people are concerned. A lot of people are concerned about Julian Assange We are hearing reports that his health is failing. Do you think, and this is what's scary about this whole entire thing, I think the British nabbed Assange and they're keeping him. If Assange dies in captivity at the British prison, what do you think the ramifications would be, and especially with the implications of the British fingerprint in this whole entire thing? What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think they're just trying to keep him out of sight, out of mind as much as possible. They don't want anybody to hear anything he has to say, because he basically volunteered to show the proof of who actually, well, proof that the Russians didn't do it, didn't give him the data. So they don't want that known. They don't want anybody to hear it. So they'll try to keep him out of sight, out of mind as best as possible. They may even sedate him just to keep him shut up, and basically he wouldn't be able to say anything to anybody. But certainly I looked at the way they charged him as being, someone who assisted Chelsea Manning in breaking through passwords to get into data. First of all, Chelsea Manning was cleared in the area where the data was, so you can assume he had most of the passwords, or had passwords to get into the system. But otherwise, if you stop and think about it, how could somebody remotely, like Julian Assange would be remote from Chelsea Manning, how could he assist in breaking through a password process? Is he going to do it on the phone saying, Chelsea, try this? Did that work? No? Okay, try this, I don't know how to do that. The other point is, he could, I guess, have given a transferred data, a program that would do a mass or bulk attack, brute force attack on the password. He could do that. So I guess if they can produce that, then sure, that's probably how he helped them. Somehow, I don't believe he had that program, though.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I'd like to let people know that there are several discussions that you've had with LaRouche PAC, including Larry Johnson, that are available at the LaRouche PAC website, and people can go there to get more from what you've said and more of your thoughts, and even some of your speculation as to what's happening. And I for one thank you for coming on with us, and I think it's extremely important that you're staying in on this. And I wish you the best with the Roger Stone case, because Roger's someone who likewise refused to be intimidated. And they're trying to make an example out of him, just as they are with Assange and with Manafort.
Yep. Well, anybody that can shed light on the crimes they've been committing, they want to silence and keep out of sight, and make sure that no one hears them.
Do you have anything else?
No, Bill, how can people follow you, and how can they support your work? Especially, I know you have that fight coming up with trying to help Roger Stone out. And also, all of us are in a fight. We're in a fight for the Republic. We're in the fight for making sure this country stays intact. But because, by God, man, we lose this country, we are entering 1,000 years of darkness. I have no doubt about that. Yeah, so right. What can we do to help you, Bill?
Well, I mean, I always say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So my version is say squeak. So if you want, you could squeak to your your representatives in the House and the Senate, and just make sure they know your feelings about it, and just tell them if they don't make sure that they straighten these issues out, that you are going to work against them in the next election. You're going to support their opponents. You're going to maybe even threaten to start to organize to start a third party to get rid of both of the parties. Because in my view, they're both equally guilty in this bulk spying on U.S. citizens. It's a direct violation of the constitutional rights of everybody, and it fundamentally is, in my view, treason against the founding principles of this nation. Which are the constitutional rights and the constitutional rights of everybody. So that's treason there. And then they tried to subvert the process, the government process. So I think basically you could call that sedition. So these are people who are elected people down there in Washington, D.C., many of whom I don't I'll give them the benefit of the doubt of being unaware or uninformed accomplices. They just don't know what they're voting for. And in some cases, they don't even, they vote for what they think is right and what the words say, but how it's interpreted by the intelligence community and those agencies is totally different. For example,
one of the things I'm trying to do is to get a congressman to bring you before a committee to present this, because it hasn't been all the committees, all the hours, all the money spent, and here you are with the story that no one else has, and they're afraid of it.
Well, here's the reason, though, Harley. The reason they don't want to hear it is because it will take away plausible deniability from them.
Mhm.
If it's in the public record that they've heard it, they can no longer say, I don't know about that.
Yeah. All right, well, we have to make sure we get you before the Congress. And again, good luck with you in the Roger Stone case. And I expect we'll be talking again and continuing the discussion.
Yep. Okay, good talking with you.
Definitely. Bill, thank you so much.
Very
And
well.
folks, thank you all for listening in. And again, follow Bill's work as well as Harley Schlanger. Thank you all for listening in. Subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, share and get this information out there. Thank you all.